Hello and welcome to the Progressive Citizen Report. My name is Brett Banks, and today on the program we'll be discussing the Washington Post report on Ebola and also the Cenk Uygar Sam Harris debate. Stay tuned, we're going to take a quick break and get started on the program. And we're back. Okay, to start off the day, we're going to discuss the Washington Post report on a man named Bobby Pomney. Now, this man's job is to quarantine people who have been around Ebola to stop the spread in Liberia. Okay, now starts off very basic. You think, oh, well, there's this and this and this you can do to quarantine and stop the spread. Okay. Well, the town in which he's been assigned to do this is a town entitled New Crew Town. Again, I'm sure most of you, some of you may have read this report already, but most of you probably have no idea the significance of New Crew Town. Well, let's go into detail now. Everything in this town is shared, whether it be mattresses, toilets, food, and the burden of caring for the ill. Okay? So already you're seeing, these are connections in which our current politicians are not drawing to the spread of Ebola, and they're fearing that it will spread here, and they're not coming to a report like this and seeing why it's spreading so bad in Africa. In parts of Africa. Okay, so Pomney is 43. He was actually from a slum himself. Now, this report focuses on two little girls whose mother has died, whose dad has been taken away to be cared for because he has Ebola. Right, so we're already seeing kind of this, you would think is in a sad, romanticized story. Well, not romanticized, but a story about tragedy, But this is real, okay? So you're already seeing, oh my goodness, this is horrible. How can we be saying things like stop, flights so no one can get there to help and no one can come from there that's a doctor, an American doctor, to get help if he has it, or for people who have been there and been around this and have been through this traumatic experience to get back to America. But we'll continue. It goes further in to say that depending on whom you ask, the population of this city is either 20,000 or 50,000. I mean, you go to any city in America, and I can guarantee you, if it's incorporated, there is a sign that says, so-and-so is this population. So it's already beginning to see, or you're already beginning to see the disorganization of a city like New Crew Town. In a place with open sewers and swarms of mosquitoes, that seems as if it were constructed to facilitate the spread of disease. It is overwhelmingly difficult place to do contact tracing. Now, these are quotes from the Washington Post report. They go on to say, this is the world of Princess and Georgina. They share an outdoor toilet without any running water, with 25 other people. In their slum, 15 members of an extended family often sleep in one home. As for their shack, it had been locked by the body collection team after the mother's body was removed, a precaution to keep people away from infected items. The team also had burned the family's mattress. Now, I don't know about you guys, but what I'm seeing here is overwhelmingly different, saddening conditions. But I would argue nowhere in America is it like this. Nowhere can you find an actual place that seems if it were constructed to facilitate the spread of disease. Okay, the report continues on to say, in Nigeria, where there were 20 confirmed or probable cases of Ebola in July, tracers created a list of 894 contacts of the patients and isolated and monitored them. Health workers conducted 18,500 face-to-face visits. Last week, the country was declared Ebola-free. It just goes to show how if you quarantine, use the proper precautions, and don't have cities that facilitate the spread of disease, this won't happen. Now, in New York, it goes on to say, officials are scouring the city to find anyone who might have had contact with Craig Spencer, a doctor, since he came down with the disease. The way to stop Ebola in its tracks is contact tracing. Tom Frieden, the head for the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, said this month. In the United States, 4 people have fallen ill with Ebola. This compares to 20 confirmed cases, 20 confirmed or probable cases of Ebola in Nigeria. And due to quarantining properly, isolating and monitoring possible infected, we have an Ebola-free country. It is just insane that we have people raving over a threat that is non-existent. Now, we'll continue through the report. It says, but in Liberia, I am very sorry about that, where more than 4,600 people have been diagnosed with the disease since March, improvised contact tracing teams were formed only after Ebola had spread widely. There could be tens of thousands of contacts scattered across slums like New Crewtown. That compares to the, I'm not sure on this number, but I think it was around 100 people total who were in contact with the people who have been confirmed with Ebola here in America. You can look at this, and anyone with a rational mind will say, wait a minute, there is no threat. We'll continue to the other context of the report. It says the country's public health system was almost non-existent even before Ebola. In the United States, many contact tracers have advanced degrees in public health. In Liberia, they are former students or shopkeepers or security guards. Until June, the man that this article was written about, Pomni, sold stationery. Look at this with a rational mind, and you will say, this could not possibly be something America is going insane over. Alright, let's further in here. Liberia's contact tracers are supposed to make daily checks on victims' friends, relatives, and neighbors, beginning as soon as the cases are identified. But in New Crewtown, the tracer said it typically takes about 10 days before the process even begins. By that time, more people have typically developed symptoms. As soon as the doctor from New York ran 100.3 fever, he called, I believe it was the health services or health center, I'm not sure, and was sent to the hospital. Quarantine. 10 days before the process even begins to have daily checks on the victim's friends, relatives, neighbors. 10 days. How is this legitimate? A legitimate fear of Americans. 10 days compared to the instant. Okay, further in the article, we see some days no one even came to check on Princess and Georgina, the girls who lost their mother. The girls walked around the area freely. They played with a headless Barbie doll in front of their home, where a flyer on the wall advertised a lottery. Your American dream starts here, it said. Win and live in the USA. There's more to this article, but I thought I'd finish it there. Your American dream starts here, it said. Win and live in the USA. We are vilifying these people. People are being quarantined from East Africa over fear, bigotry, and ignorance. Many things in history have been because of fear, ignorance. I am not understanding why we are able to vilify these people for a disease that is only spreading through their country so rampantly because of their lack of just basic sewage systems. Toilets that aren't shared by 25 people. Toilets that have running water, for Pete's sake. Yet we are so insanely worried that we are having a real conversation about shutting down flights from these countries. That shuts down flights for medical personnel. That shuts down flights for everyone. And what do you think those people are going to do who are scared and who need help? They're certainly not going to give up if that's their last chance. They're going to go somewhere else. Somewhere they can't. There's no contact tracing. And as I showed earlier, as reported in this article, without contact tracing, that's when it spreads. This is evidence. This evidence is proven by Nigeria, who now have no citizens infected with Ebola. That's all I'm going to go into on the Ebola crisis. But what I want to say to anyone listening who might say, logically there is a point to closing down flights, to 3-week quarantines of anyone who wants to fly from these countries and anyone who gets to this country from those countries. The logic says there's no issue. The doctors say there's no issue. The CDC say there's no issue. So there is no issue. Alright, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, discuss the Sam Harris, Cenk Uygar debate. We'll be right back. Okay, and we're back. The second topic we're going to discuss is related to an article I read on a website entitled Breitbart, I'm not sure the pronunciation there, .com. This debate, I'm not sure if you've heard about, is between Sam Harris and Cenk Uygar. And the debate was over whether or not Islam is inherently violent, just general discussion of religion, okay? But with a central focus on Islam. And Cenk really questioning why he has a different opinion on Christianity and Islam when they're both equally ignorant. And to quote what Cenk says, is 2 plus 2 equals 5? Wrong. 2 plus 2 equals 6? Wrong. They're both wrong. It's not different in, their level. Where they're wrong at, of course, is different, but they're wrong. They're equally wrong, unbiased, wrong. Okay? And what he goes into is Harris's differentiating opinion on Islam and Christianity. So, what I was wanting to look at is this article because of its obvious atheism or new atheism bias. Okay, let's just read the title. Atheist Sam Harris and Islamism apologist Cenk Uygar engaged in a face-off debate on Uygar's cable show, The Young Turks, over whether or not Islam is violent. During the 3-hour debate, Uygar accuses Harris of being biased against Islam. Now I just really want to highlight the Islamism apologist Cenk Uygar. That's his title. That's in the title of the article. That's how they first addressed Cenk. So anyone reading this is automatically going to say he's an Islamism apologist. And in fact, many of you know he's not, to be blunt. He is equally angry, or not angry, but discouraged by all religions. They're all equally wrong. All the point he's trying to make is that there is no difference between how wrong Christianity is and how wrong Islam is. Whether it's 2 plus 2 equals 5 or 2 plus 2 equals 6, they're both wrong. That's actually, I'm paraphrasing, not sure the exact quote, but he uses that. The 2 plus 2 equals 5, the 2 plus 2 equals 6. They're both equally wrong. It goes on to say, the interview was informative and wide-reaching on its subject matter, which is true. Here's where it gets very obviously biased, again. But it featured a constantly interrupting Uygar who pounced on many points before Harris was through responding, only to agree somewhat with Harris's points when Harris was allowed to finish expounding on them. I'm not sure how many of you guys have seen the interview. But if you watch the interview, they both interrupt, okay? I will admit that. Cenk does interrupt, but so does Sam. And a lot of the times, it's necessary interruption, because a lot of the times in a debate, you get caught up, and you just throw out 4 or 5 points, and then you just keep going and going and going. And it's hard to answer all those points, because you forget what they were, and it just gets lost. So both of them equally interrupt. Now, we'll go on in this article, and here's the next paragraph. At the top of the interview, Harris went on a tear against the many commentators he felt have taken him out of context and distorted his views, even calling what many of them have said about him, including Uygar, a form of pure slander. Now, I want to go at a point Sam Harris makes right here. He feels people have taken him out of context. That's interesting. Because everything someone says can't be taken out of context, according to him and his view on Islam. Right? For a person who says there is no ability for things to be taken out of context, a lot of his statements are taken out of context. All that is necessary to be said about Sam Harris's comments in that early part of the interview are that you can have a person from Westboro Baptist Church on your program, and then have someone from a synagogue on your program. There will be no connection drawn between this guy and this guy, okay? There is a way to differentiate what people say. And they were on the topic of religion. And as Cenk says, of course not everyone agrees with every word. Even Cenk says that he didn't agree with everything Reza Aslan said. That's one of the things Harris says, is that Reza Aslan misunderstands him, takes him out of context, and throws a completely different bucket of paint on this portrait. Let's go on. At one point, Uygar bristled at Harris's claims that Islam is a particularly violent religion because of the image of Muhammad himself. Uygar claimed that nearly every religious text has some violence in it, but Harris countered that among the world's religions, only Muhammad is portrayed as a vicious warrior figure. Jesus, by comparison, is presented as a hippie who got crucified. Now, there is some truth to this statement. But as he's saying this, the deal is that there is such thing as the Ottoman Empire. An empire who did not follow Muhammad's teaching down to the T. They did not kill everyone that the Quran says to kill. And there's still the argument that could be made that an infidel in there, in the Quran, is not even a Jew and a Christian, but in fact a pagan at the time. But we're not going to get into that. The deal is that everyone has the ability, and all Muslims, all Christians, all religious people have the choice to follow their text to the T or to ignore parts of it and to cherry pick. Do I agree with cherry picking? Of course not. There is no, it speaks to the credibility of a text when you have a text that is wrong or just plain ignorant. But here's the thing, is that through the centuries, different empires and different single people have cherry-picked in both religions, Christianity and Islam. Let's go further into this article. Harris cautioned, as he often has, that he is not claiming that every Muslim is terror-prone. Now let's look at that, as he often has. There's always, I've been hearing this a lot on a lot of the liberal media sites, is that he always adds a caveat to everything he says. He's smart. He's not an ignorant man. I'll give him that. But he did note that Islam is currently the only major religion that supports stoning, homosexual hangings, honor killings, and other extreme violence. Of course, there are radical Muslims who do terrible things. But it's not just because they're a Muslim. It has to do with the geopolitical environment. If every Muslim was a killer, 1.6 billion people would have killed someone in their neighborhood. It is just an ignorant statement to say that it is just because of Islam, or that Islam is a huge factor. It is a factor, but I would say, and I will argue, that geopolitical factors are more of the prevalent issues at hand. We continue. Still, the discussion was mostly civil, and Harris got the last 10 minutes to go into detail about some of his more controversial statements. But the controversial statements are hardly anything new. Harris has been at the forefront of criticizing Islam for over a decade. In 2004, for instance, Harris asserted that we are in a war against Islam, but we are not in a war against all Muslims. It is time we admitted that we are not at war with terrorism. We are at war with Islam. This is not to say that we are at war with all Muslims, but we are absolutely at war with the vision of life that is prescribed to all Muslims in the Quran. The only reason Muslim fundamentalism is a threat to us is because the fundamentals of Islam are a threat to us. Every American should read the Quran and discover the relentlessness with which non-Muslims are vilified in its pages. The idea that Islam is a peaceful religion hijacked by extremists is a dangerous fantasy. It is now a particularly dangerous fantasy for Muslims to indulge. Again, all we have to do to end this discussion on whether Islam is the determinant factor in the murder of people is reference the Ottoman Empire. They conquered, and of course they killed, as did every nation who conquered. But they did not follow every line down to the last letter of the Quran in their conquering. Otherwise, many thousands of people would be dead. This is the last paragraph of that article. Certainly, Harris has been a lightning rod for criticism since the early 2000s, and opponents abound. Recently, Muslim apologists, again with the Muslim apologist, Reza Aslan, accused Harris of being paranoid and said that he thinks Harris feels that he is completely under siege by everyone, that everyone is out to get him. Aslan also called Harris uninformed and unsophisticated. I would argue neither of them are 100% right, and I'm sure many of you will agree. But here is a determining factor in why Harris is wrong, and why what he says is dangerous. There is a movement, as many of you know, known as the neoliberal movement. It is a more conservative, war-wanting group of people. And people like Sam Harris really are at the center of this movement. And they even entitled, I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but they're called New Atheism. I don't know if they coined that term. But here is the thing. Neoliberalism and neo-atheism are crossing over at a lot of dangerous points, because neoliberalism has a following. Neo-atheism has a following. These people are necessary to a war against nations who claim themselves to be Islamic nations. We do not need, and the American people do not want, another war in that region. Harris has come out in support of torture with, of course, a caveat. But these kinds of more conservative movements are dangerous to Americans in the fact that they want wars, in the fact that they want corporations to be able to control things, to have a government that is large and takes care of its people, but also doesn't really worry about who it kills in its wars. The way I want to sum this up is by saying, of course, any of these articles I've mentioned, which today was only 2, you can always find in the comments section below or in the description. And what you guys need to do is send me in some questions, and we will discuss those questions on the next episode. And we will talk more about this Muslim attack that is going on by this neo-atheism, this neoliberal. Those two movements conjoined with Fox News and its adherents is just creating an absolutely volatile political field for Muslims. That is all today. Thanks, guys, for listening. We will be broadcasting tomorrow. I'm sorry about yesterday. We had a slight technical issue. It won't happen again. We switched softwares. Thanks for listening.